Morning, everyone. Hi, welcome to Horizons NRTF conference online. And this is the future proofing for the rural touring sector. And welcome. I am Laurie Gillis. I work with the Atlantic Presenters Association, which is a network of theaters, festivals, community presenters across Atlantic Canada, which is on the east coast of Canada, the closest bit to where you are in the UK. We have members that do performances in small churches, converted churches, and we also have members who run 1,000-seat theater halls. So we're quite a diverse group. And we do have a strong connection with the National Rural Touring Forum. We have built some great relationships with a number of your schemes there, and very happy to be part of this panel today. I'm chairing the panel today, so I'm going to do my best to keep things on, well as get as much information out of these amazing panelists as I can for you to take home with you. So we're just going to self-introduce, and I'm going to call upon Danielle Corbishley of Beautiful Creatures and 101 Outdoor Arts to give her 2 minutes on who you are.
Brilliant. Hello. Hi, everyone. Hello. Thank you very much for inviting me to come along today. Yeah, my name's Danielle. I'm passionate about rural touring and outdoor arts in both. So I've been touring rurally with my theatre company, Beautiful Creatures, for many years through the Applause Rural Touring Network. So I've taken 4 shows out and toured across Kent and West Sussex. And also in my own region in Reading, so I've been touring and working in localised communities and making work across the span of Berkshire for many years. So I have a huge passion in terms of developing audiences, and I'm also now in post at 101 Outdoor Arts Creation Space in Newbury, which is a 20,000 square foot fabrication and rehearsal facility dedicated to the outdoor arts. We run a sort of year-long programme of artistic residencies for outdoor artists from all across the world who come to make and develop work with us, which is really cool, and a programme of professional development training and an outdoor programme as well. So yeah, deep-rooted passion for rural touring and also for the development of outdoor arts.
Excellent. Well, you're in the right place, I think. Next, we have Amanda Parker, who is an arts professional, I guess, jack of all trades, I think, Amanda.
But master of none, probably, yes. Hello, thank you for having me. Yes, Arts Professional is business to business. It's a publication that talks to the arts sector, it's by the arts sector, and it's for the arts sector. So we have articles, we have daily news, and we have features, longer form interrogations by the professionals that are in the sector, from artists to creatives to front of house. And oh, look at that, a cup of tea's just arrived for me.
Oh, perfect.
So yes, I feel that we have a very useful overview of what's going on in the sector, because we talk across museum, visual arts, theatre, heritage and crafts. And yeah, happy to be joining you guys. Excellent, thanks.
I guess, and you're an old hat at this, Amanda, I think too. This is, you know the routine here.
Well, so I'm fairly Zoom adept, but we all are. This is our life. I hardly go out these days.
Yeah. Next, we have Lorna Doguid, Form Manager at Creative Scotland.
Hi, so I'm multi-art firm manager at Creative Scotland, and I lead on the Creative Scotland Turin Fund, which is, I'll talk about that a little bit later. And I also work with our Place and Communities team on arts programming, how to support arts programming across Scotland, some of which is obviously very urban, but a large majority of it is in a rural context, and often working with our rural touring networks in the Highlands, the northeast of Scotland, Dumfries and Galway, and the borders. So,
excellent, thanks. That sounds like a bit. You're very busy, I'm guessing.
Yeah, very busy, especially at the moment.
Yeah. And finally, we have Liz Pugh, creative producer and co-founder at Walk the Plank.
Good morning, everybody, and delighted to be joining this online conference. Walk the Plank has been making work in public space for many, many years, but we began with a touring theatre ship that used to go around the high seas of Britain to mainly very rural, small places. Since then, we have been working in urban locations, rural locations, and anywhere in between. And we lost almost all our work in March, and I hope that I can bring some insights about ways in which we might be able to start thinking collectively about the new normal and how to take advantage of what the rural landscape offers.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, I hope we figure that out today too, because we have the simple task of figuring out the true value of the rural touring sector and what it needs to survive. No problem, no big deal. We can do that in definitely 45 minutes. To help with this, though, the team at NRTF has provided us with a few points of discussion. So we'll kind of use those as a guide as we go through the next 30 minutes or so. We'll have a conversation amongst us for the next 30 minutes, 35 minutes, and then we'll also try and leave some time for question and answers at the end. But if anyone has questions throughout the session, please share them in the chat, and we'll either address them in the moment if it makes sense, or during the Q&A session. We'll try and kind of just kind of wing it, and it'll be a little organic as we kind of move through the next 30, 40. So our first kind of thoughts or topic we thought we might try and look at is what future proofing has kind of already taken place. And Amanda and Lorna kind of thought they might be able to kind of give us some sort of review or highlights of maybe what's happening now or what we can be building on now to work forward to a future. Well, too many futures. Amanda, Lorna, I don't know who would like to go first on that.
I'm happy to dive in if that's okay.
Okay, go ahead, Amanda.
So I think a couple of things have happened, and I would group them around advocacy and government-facing activity and tech. Let me start with the tech. I love a stat. I'm so boring. I love a stat. A recent research that we've seen across arts professionals is that something like 87% of museums and heritage sector organisations have produced some kind of digital activity during the last 7 months, and just 2% have no intention of doing any digital activity. I'd love to know who those 2% are. I want to know what they're doing, but they're going, no, not for us, the future. So I think that's the first thing that we've all gone, crikey, work's dried up. Oh my goodness, I can't be in physical spaces. Yes, let's go to digital. How can we do this? We all have the challenges around making that work viable, financially viable. We understand this, and that is growing, and there's a lot of very interesting models as to how that's happening. One example I can give is an organisation that are working with one of the leading ticket agencies to make sure that they can sell their tickets as they usually do, which is a pay what you can model, and how you make that appear in digital form is really lovely, that they're keeping their business values at the core and delivering it digitally. Balancing that, 81% of the sector, the heritage sector, feel that their skills are not up to scratch in the digital field. So I would say training is something that we need as well. So there's a kind of positive and negative attached to digital engagement, well, and revenue. Let's not forget that. On the other side, I want to reflect on the massive amount of advocacy that's gone on to the sector. I can't remember who it was that said, I'm so fed up with open letters. I feel sorry for the Arts Council with the number of open letters that they get, which was beautiful. Advocacy has been intense, has been necessary, has been valuable. I could pick out many examples. I'll just reference the what in my head is seat out to eat out, but is in actual fact Operation Sleeping Beauty and government's commitment to buy seats to make Panto come back in very limited form. It's not the answer, but you know, it's a move forward that has come from advocacy in the sector. So what we've seen is a huge amount of very actively engaged individuals who are used to getting things done, piling in behind advocacy. So what do we need for the future? We need a more coherent, consistent and connected engagement with government, because we need to make our case for survival a lot more coherent, streamlined, one voice. There is a one voice campaign, and the irony of that isn't lost to me, a one voice campaign in the midst of other one voice campaigns. I'm going to stop there because I think they're the highlights for me at the moment.
Yeah, I would echo that. I think, and obviously in Scotland things are different, that we operate under a slightly different model to the devolved government in Scotland. And what we have tried to do at Creative Scotland is work very closely with the sector bodies to make sure that that is a coherent voice, so that we are part of the lobbying to Scottish Government, which has been successful in part, but it does mean that we are hearing a sort of collective viewpoint. We're presenting a collective viewpoint, which I think is really important. In terms of practicalities, what Creative Scotland has done, we recently, over August and September, hosted, we didn't host it, we asked Articulation, which is the membership body for outdoor arts, to curate some sessions, bringing together practitioners of, they are a membership body for outdoor physical performance, site-specific work. They brought together promoters, local authorities and artists to discuss what the possibilities were to move forward into a post or a current COVID and then post-COVID world, which have been, I'm going to pop the link into the chat so that people can see, because they were all filmed and they're quite an interesting resource about how just to break down those barriers so that work can still be carried on. Because one of the things that has been really clear is the research that we have done in terms of audience willingness to return is 50% of audiences are very keen to return, but only if they know it's safe. And 50% of potential audiences are not keen to return at all, and they're looking for new means of engagement. So how do we ensure that the reach of the arts is still happening, especially across rural communities? We've also pivoted our touring fund. I don't know if anyone knows about the Creative Scotland Touring Fund, but we underwrite the cost of shows to all promoters that are interested. So there's no box office involved. There's no requirement for any promoter to actually pay the company. We underwrite the entire cost of making and touring the work. And obviously in March, that just disappeared. And we have about 20 shows that are sitting there ready to go that have been funded. Some of them have been made and they have nowhere to go to. So what we've tried to do, and we're about to ask them to come and give us plans for how they might restage, how they might re-engage, whether that is through slow touring. There's been some really successful projects in Scotland about slow touring, where companies go to a location and spend more time developing audiences, how they work in developing audiences. So we would like those shows that are in hiatus, if you like. They're just sitting there. We ensured that all the artists were paid. We said that was something that they absolutely had to do. But we are trying to get, well, we've got some funding for them to be able to restage in a new way. So throw out all the requirements for the number of venues that you have to reach, the number of audiences, and say, right, you have a piece of work. How can you make it work in this new context? You come up with the idea, you build the relationships with the promoters, and then come back to us and we will see how we can support that. So I think it's, in terms of future-proofing, the move, I think, was always to move away from the old model of touring. to move into a more engaged and nothing for us without us model. And I think that what COVID has done is it's brought that suddenly we have to absolutely start working in that way. We can't put it off. We can't say, oh, we'll have a little project over here and we'll pilot things. We absolutely have to find a new way to keep audiences engaged and allow artists to put their work in front of them. That's what I see the role of Creative Scotland is that our role is to make sure that audiences and artists have the chance to connect. So those are just a couple of practical things that we are trying to do.
That's fantastic. That being flexible in your funding, that's something that we are doing here in Canada as well. I'm not sure how nimble that is as compared to what you're doing, but that is so important to the survival of our organizations here is that flexibility with what their programming was giving and what they really need to be doing.
Yeah, I think what's quite interesting though is that I think ACE did it as well, but we acted very quickly to ensure that artists were paid, so that anyone who had a current grant, the requirement to actually deliver anything with that current grant was waived in essence, but to ensure that anyone who was contracted got their money. But now, as we're starting to come out of it, it's how do we find a way out of that? So people are still desperate to deliver. Artists are always desperate to deliver what they said they would do, and they want to create work. They want their work to find an audience. And I think that is the challenge over the next few months. Oh, how many months, we don't know. But that's the challenge, is how do we ensure that that impetus to create work and reach audiences actually is enabled?
I think there's something else here though as well, and I'm sure other speakers will get to it, but I mentioned digital skills, but actually the wider need is skills development and training, partnerships outside of organizations, and frankly reality. We are not alone as a sector in having to look very hard at ourselves in the mirror and say, we are going to face redundancies, we are going to shrink in size, and what can we do to help people transition or skill them up to look at other futures whilst retaining the talent pipeline. I think it's really exciting, the stuff that has been coming out. I've seen some fantastic projects that I'm happy to share later because I don't want to, and I've seen brilliant government commitment. I mean, Wales in particular coming out with the Creative Nature Partnership is outstanding in going, we have a commitment to outdoor arts and we're going to invest in it. Notwithstanding the conversations about tax credits for museums, business rates relief, all of the other stuff we could talk about, reality is a very tough one. Where do we work? How do we work? And who else across all of our industries is facing no work, redundancy, future disengagement? I think that's important too. And sorry to be the, feel such a Cassandra for saying it so early on, but I think it's important to reflect.
Yeah. Sorry to jump in again. There's another thing there when you flip that into the audience, is how do audiences access digital work? Because there's a huge digital barrier to inclusion, especially in the Highlands of Scotland and in the borders of Scotland, where internet provision is practically non-existent, and everyone moving to digital really excludes huge areas of the country. And also the whole fact that education has moved digitally, so there's a competition being set up there of who gets to see, which I think we need to bear in mind all the time.
There's been some nice lo-fi projects, haven't there, which I've quite enjoyed, sort of sending out some VHS tapes, and kind of creative projects on cassette tape at the Corn Exchange, which is the organisation that 101 sits within, have been doing a contactless creativity and sending out bags. People that don't have access to technology, and asking practitioners to record on dictaphones instructions that get sent out. I've quite enjoyed all of those sort of lo-fi ways to just rethink what technology is and how we can reach, different people through different forms of technology.
I love the local radios that have popped up, theatres delivering their work by radio for sheltered communities who are not going to go online but will find a local station. And the door-to-door work that's happening, the processional work, the call up an artist work, it's absolutely beautiful, notwithstanding that.
And I'll just sort of back up what you're saying about artists wanting to innovate and being creative. And at 101, I've just been, you know, really blown away by the passion and the creativity and the enthusiasm for artists who are continuing to and it's exhausting, isn't it? And I can feel, I can hear the fatigue, you know, in everybody at every level, really, of this consistent reimagining, consistent shifting, cancelling, replanning. It is exhausting having to completely rethink a model of working that actually you've built up your entire life around. You know, we've been very busy actually at 101 over the last, since July. We've had 13 artists working in residence. You know, some of that is companies who had existing projects that were kind of paused, essentially, but there's been a number of artists who have very quickly started to reimagine and innovate, and you know, and that a lot of them are talking about just their passion and their want to get out and reach communities, you know, and take work out into new contexts, and starting to think about other models and other ways of touring and working in more localized ways, you know, building partnerships in their local communities that they hadn't had before, and reaching out and trying to find new ways. And all of that, I think, it can be is potentially a really positive thing ongoing anyway, you know, encouraging artists to just think more broadly about ways in which they can find and access and create platforms for work.
I think that also requires two things. I think we have to leave some space for the sense of grief that people who make live performance are feeling, because I'm feeling grief about what we're losing, and I think that's shared. But I also think we have to work with communities and, you know, networks like the Rural Touring Network, so brilliant access for this, because actually it's about inviting communities to think how they want to work with artists. I agree with all that's been said about the sort of old model of touring is now on it's on its way out. So what does that mean? And how can we feel sad about what we're losing, but also how might we now start to see the opportunities to really rethink the role of the artist to work with communities in rural areas who I think are at the sort of cutting edge of some of the challenges around land, food, water, those issues that are going to be driving conversations. And I think the chance for residencies rather than one night touring, I was thinking about it. I was thinking about the opportunity for a love affair rather than a one night stand, and that so perhaps what we need to do is think about how artists might be adopted by a rural area for a longer time, and you know, do we need some sort of, to extend the metaphor, marriage brokering between artists who may not have thought about making work in rural landscapes and communities that are willing to play host and look at a process rather than always an end product.
I'm just about, sorry to jump in, but I'm just about to put a thing in the chat of a project that we didn't fund this. This was Paul Hamlin funded, and it was the Turin Network in the Highlands, working with Lisa Baxter's The Experience Business, and it took 3 artists or companies and built a relationship, did that very thing of match made with rural communities. And I've put the results on. There's quite a lot of resource in there that is quite useful about how those relationships can be built and what the findings were. And it was actually radically life-changing for the artists that were involved. The communities were just doing their thing and were encouraged, and it was very important that it was facilitated. And the communities that they worked with were quite upfront and very strong in their opinions. And for the artists that were involved, it became a quite life-changing experience of how they viewed. They didn't change their work, but they approached it in a completely different way. So that might be useful. I'll just put that in the chat.
And to add for that. IETM, who are the European Arts Network, have done lots and lots of research around work in rural landscapes across Europe. And one of the conclusions that came out, they did a wonderful session in Llandudno, and one of the things that came out is that artists who are going to work in rural locations need to arrive with open ears, active listening, and no sense of what they're bringing, you know, that actually it's all about digging deep on the land that people are standing on, and accepting that those in rural locations are the experts, and that the artists come in to look with new eyes and listen with new ears. I'll put the link in the channel for the IETM, you know, work around rural work. Yeah.
That's really lovely.
That's
That
really
is
exciting, not least because I hear a lot of that from the other perspective, which is when I'm looking at inclusion in particular, what do people need to be able to go into spaces that, if they were to have a love affair, not a one night stand, I love that. What would they need? What are the terms for engagement? What's your Tinder profile, if you like? I'm pushing the analogy there. And yeah, I'm interested in what you said about open ears and active listening, because there are a number of developments, not least the disability rider that is in development. And there are a couple in development around inclusion more widely. What do artists need to go into rural spaces effectively and have effective engagement and connection and understanding? So that's really exciting. I think we could matchmake here.
And that's why I think, you know, outdoor artists are really well placed at the moment. They have a lot of very, very valuable, you know, and brilliant skills in terms of, you know, bringing people together, people of all ages, you know, from different backgrounds with different needs, sensitively together in public spaces. You know, and there's sort of two folds to that. One is the sort of the COVID world, isn't there, about what artists very gently thinking about what the work is that we're presenting at the moment, and how we can sort of help to, you know, to sort of heal some of the fractured connections between us, you know, and address the sort of the huge amounts of anxiety that are around at the moment. And outdoor artists, I think, being some of them, not all of them, obviously, not making massive assumptions, some of them are terrible at it, but some of them are really brilliant at bringing people together sensitively in public spaces, but also in rural touring context. I mean, I've always loved that about the rural tour, the nature of rural touring work, is that you go into these, you know, into these beautiful spaces where there's huge amounts of ownership, you know, and the events that are run in those places are run by families, communities. Everybody is very passionate about those spaces and those events, you know, and it's very much a case of performing with those communities, not at them, you know. And again, outdoor artists, particularly those that are used to doing street theatre, you know, very well adept at having, you know, the skills of breaking down the fourth wall and interacting and participating, and, as you were saying, Liz, really listening, you know, to the needs of those people, and kind of, I guess, making the work relevant. That's really important, you know.
And I think at the moment, you know, certainly what we've been thinking at Walk the Plank is, we were known for epic, large-scale productions that engage, you know, hundreds of people, and we're really having to think now about intimate rather than epic, and dispersed rather than clustered. And I think what that means is looking at the idea of duration and installations rather than performances, looking at trails and walks and ways of leading people through public space. And that might be around a village that they've lived in, but need to, you know, perhaps there's an opportunity to look at with new eyes, led with and by artists, but also the role of as you were saying, you know, the role of those host communities as active participants, not passive spectators. And I think that's where the opportunity really sits with this new world. And we've probably got, you know, at least 2 years, haven't we, where we're going to be socially distant. So what sort of work can we be making with communities in rural locations, and not just those that came to watch the shows in in community centres, those who sat and watched, but also what about the farmers? What about the people who are working on the land? And I know there's less and less of them.
I think there's also a concern for us that we need to build on the skills and use the skills of the people who are the experts in that kind of work, and not force everyone, but everyone can't do it. It's not something that is a universal skill that if you make sit-down theatre or Turin theatre, you can automatically go and take your work outside or site-specific or promenade or whatever it is. We need to be really careful that it's the people who are skilled, who have great experience in that involving of a community and working with a community, who are encouraged to do as much of that as they can, but not to just say, well, everybody has to do that now, because people, it's not the way their work fits necessarily, and trying to force people into that's the new way. I think we need to just be very cautious about that and support those people that can't make work in that way to find perhaps another way to do it. And obviously it all has to be led by the artistic impulse. We can't say, oh, now everyone's going to do site-specific work. Could you just put your applications in for that, please? We need to be, as a funder, we need to be responsive to artists' approaches to things and how they build the new world.
We're hoping at 101, we're talking to the Applause Network about doing some professional development work with artists over the next year around skills and knowledge, specifically around kind of rural touring, because I don't think that many outdoor artists actually are familiar with the opportunities that can be presented through doing rural touring. Actually, it's only a small proportion, I think, that sort of have a really good understanding of what those opportunities are and how to reach those networks and where the commissioning pots are. Similarly, I don't think there's a huge number of outdoors organisations that are working within their own communities, in their own towns, where there's been a focus on touring work. And again, I think it's about, like you're suggesting, what are the ways in which we can be, as development organisations and producers, encouraging and supporting artists to diversify their skills and knowledge of how to build those partnerships in their local communities, how to work with local housing associations or other partnership and community organisations to reach people.
And that's the thing, I think, that are the seeds of an opportunity, because what I think we sometimes fail to do in the sector is speak and work in partnership with others. And during the pandemic, we've heard very loudly the need to evidence your engagement with local authorities and make sure that your local authority knows about your work so they can support your bids for funding. But here's the nub of it, that offers an opportunity for the arts to actually support and lean into the skill set that's there on the ground already and amplify the digital skills, the relationship building skills, the community leadership skills, the commercial activity that goes on in local communities as well, in a way that doesn't require the artist to have to diversify and become all things to all men, the marketing, promotions person, relationship builder, project management, touring officer, etc. I think that's quite exciting if we can articulate that and activate that really strongly, that you can go into a space with your craft and you can use the resource that's there on the ground effectively.
Yeah, that's a brilliant idea.
Sorry, Lorna, I'm going to say
no,
something.
it was just to say there's a question in the chat about a couple of questions. Which actually just ties on to what you're saying, Amanda, that about somebody who's got a show about domestic abuse and coercive control, really important for rural touring and the really remote spaces which maybe have no internet access. How do we get that out there if we can't tour live? And I would say that's absolutely about partnership working. It's absolutely about finding the partners on the ground who are working in that area and using their resource to assist you to get your work out, whether that is digital or in community centres in a safe way, but there are people in communities who will be working in that arena.
So I can flag, if it's helpful, a couple of models like the cultural high street emphasis that's going on in lots of areas where you bring that art to the shops and areas in your high street and local community that aren't being used anymore. I know locally we have, I think it's called the Refugee Museum, that's a permanent art space now in the middle of a shopping mall. So it absolutely invites anyone and everyone to find it. There's another example I could give of a Micro in San Francisco, which is absolutely that, taking art into unexpected commercial places, high streets, other areas. And that, to me, I mean, you know, that I don't mean to be prescriptive about it. Wilderness, equally, an outdoor festival that's going into museums. So I think there's something about how you reimagine where you perform and how you perform with a show like that, because obviously there's high need, there's a very clear interest. I can see local groups, not just arts organisations leaning into that, but welfare groups and social cohesion groups would be interested in that. It's just the where you find it. So I'd invite you to have a look around and look at the models that are already out there of in shops, in unused shops, in commercial spaces, and they're not being used. As I said, we are heading towards a recession where increasingly others will be not working. So we can use that and amplify and build on that.
And I know NRTF did a project about using libraries as performance spaces as well. I don't know where that's got to, but I know that they did a huge research project about how to use libraries and work with the library network to enhance reach across the country.
There's been a lot of work with libraries, yeah, in the last few years, haven't there? And quite a few sort of touring networks around libraries. I've done a project across Reading's libraries actually, which again is about trying to find great ways to get out and reach people. You know, I like the idea of the rural touring network sort of expanding out into the edges of towns and cities as well. You know, certainly in terms of sort of trying to reach a wider, wider representation of people as well. You know, because I think there's something around there.
One of the things that we've found is that actually the rural areas of Scotland are, I would never say well provided for, because they're absolutely not. But the worst areas are actually, and it's a horrible word, the peri-urban between Glasgow and Edinburgh. And it's the small towns that have very, very little. But because they're so close to large urban areas, they're overlooked completely. And their local authorities would assume that all the facilities are there in the large urban areas, but actually they are just as rural as somewhere on the Scottish Islands.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think where, you know, similarly around the outsides of Reading, I think, where lots of those sort of outlying communities often sort of fall between the cracks of having sort of some cultural offering. You know, and again, that's part of that remit of work of supporting arts organisations to develop work in their local areas where they can, and that longer, the durational work that takes place, so that those arts organisations can really get to know those communities, you know, spending more time there and forging more relationships with people, you know, and it being much, you know, being a broader conversation.
I think the second question is very interesting as well, around younger people.
The age-old question of getting a younger audience into your space, or, you know, yeah.
But maybe that's the wrong question. It's not about how do you get them into your space. Maybe the question is, how do we, the artists, go to their space, and what is their space, and do they even want us? And then how do you, what that means often is working with artists who are themselves already in that space because they are young, or they're working with the tools and technologies that young people are so comfortable with.
I would I just wrote down agency, relevance and need. You know, every audience needs to have agency with the artistic creation, and needs to feel it's relevant to their life, and the need is addressed by some other organisations sometimes. So again, at best, is that a partnership question, or is that, as Liz has suggested, a focus on doing what you do for the people that you do it for?
Outdoor
And
Arts
there's been quite no, you go.
Sorry, just Outdoor Arts UK did an interesting audience survey that's available on their website 2018, just with some interesting statistics around the reach of outdoor arts as it currently sort of sits, or the type of work that's available, and it doing a really good job at sort of appealing to younger people in some of its forms.
And it's incredibly inclusive. I mean, I won't bore you, it's like preaching to the choir here, but it's more inclusive in many ways than indoor arts.
Mm.
But can still go a lot further, I think, in terms of being representative of a broader range, outdoor arts as a whole, I think.
I think I'm just mindful of the time. We probably have about maybe 5 or 10 minutes left. So I don't know if there's any kind of sustainable visions that folks want to share. We'll keep an eye on the chat. I'll try and do a better job keeping an eye on the chat for any questions that folks may have, if you've been saving it to the end of the discussion. But I'm not sure if we just want to go around the room, or if you just want to kind of do popcorn style as we've been doing. Just any sustainable visions as we're moving forward. We've kind of really touched on a number of those opportunities, but
the one thing I was going to just say that's quite important, it's a slightly a bigger note, is that if we're really talking about future proofing, we need to be talking about the environment and sustainability and human rights and other things that are going to prevent it. It's going to create and the well-being agenda to create a happy, healthy world for us to be in, that survives and without future pandemics. Yeah.
Absolutely.
It looks like there's a question for me in the chat. Could whoever asked that question maybe explain a little bit more about what they mean? Just to see, it's a question that says, is Creative Scotland going to pivot resources to a digital engagement for artists? And I'm not quite sure what they mean by that. We have already run a pilot scheme on digital skills, which we're looking to expand, which was actually started before lockdown and will be continuing. But I'm not quite sure exactly what they mean by that question. So I'll answer it if I can. Yeah, thank you. What we have done is that our open fund, which I think is a bit like Grants for the Arts, we've said that is about sustaining creative practice, and many of the applications we're seeing into that without an end delivery thing. So we're not asking for people to actually deliver a project. It's about actually sustaining their practice during this time of closure. And many of those applications are digitally focused and about digital pivoting.
And I would add to the sustainability point, and I feel like it is the same point, so forgive me if I'm kind of overlooking it. Inclusion, that as we lose people out of the sector, we really ought to come back or rebuild, whichever you prefer, in a way that reflects the demography of the country. And we all know the challenges of digital engagement and the opportunities that gives to some disabilities, but the challenges of technical and digital poverty in some areas challenges that in and of itself. So I just want to add to the mix, let's not forget inclusion. I feel slightly bad adding it as an afterthought, because it certainly shouldn't be an afterthought, but I think it's part of the sustainability model.
I think it's really important, isn't it, that people that have power take this time to think about what type of world we want to move forward into, and that we can just bang our heads together and try and create some real change.
Yeah,
because there are significant problems in the structures and the systems that we all exist within. I don't necessarily have to do that, but it's frustrating, but there must be better ways for us to work together to address some of those things properly.
And maybe there's an opportunity for people to think more about how online and offline activities can work together and complement each other, so that projects are conceived as having feet in both space. And that means that people who are not able to access in the physical world don't feel shortchanged by the investment that is being made from the public purse on their behalf. And what I feel optimistic about, because I started by talking about a sense of grief, I'll end by thinking about optimism. I feel optimistic about most artists' amazing ability to adapt, innovate, rethink, and get going again. And I suppose, you know, really encouraging people now to not forget that they got brilliant at Zoom, but take some of that new digital confidence into how they are conceiving their work. And if their work was performance-based, then thinking about how stories might be told across different platforms. If their work is installation-based, then how might they be using AR or VR to add things to the installations? And I think we've really got to skill up, as Amanda was saying. We've got to look at learning new things, and we've all got plenty of time to learn. Not all of us, but actually some of us have got time to learn new things because we're no longer able to go out. So, you know, let's really step up as artists, as arts organisations, and as, you know, people who are supporting those networks.
Yeah, thanks for that, Liz. It's very true. My area of interest lies within those networks, you know, how they work to support the greater sector. You know, the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. And I think in this moment of crisis, we are seeing how important our networks are, how essential art service organizations are to the sector, especially in rural and remote areas where knowing you're not alone is so important. To, you know, for mental health reasons, for keeping your doors open, for just keep on keeping on kind of thing. So I think that collaboration, the partnerships, those keywords that have come up through the discussion, I think are very important. And particularly, I think in rural and remote areas where you can feel very alone, knowing you're not, that there's others who are feeling your pain or have brilliant ideas on how to deal with situations, just is an invaluable support to those folks. So I want to thank you all very much. I think we should maybe look at wrapping up. There is a positive question to finish in the notes in the chat here. And that's what helps you to remain positive. As you know, what I guess we kind of touched on that a little bit. I think in these daunting challenges, there are beacons of hope, and we've all kind of answered our last questions here on a brighter note. So maybe just a quick around the table on what is keeping you positive. So Danielle, do you want us to start? Put you on the spot.
I've always been driven by theatre, by making performance, and so, you know, I think it's the arts, whether that's, you know, it's a small personal thing, tinkering around with a synthesizer, or, you know, talking to other people about stimulating ideas and innovation. But yeah, I guess ultimately, which is always about connecting to people, connecting with people through emotion and through sensory experiences, I guess. Yeah, that keeps me going.
Lorna.
Kind of the same. What's kept me going is actually the response of artists. That you know, there was a sort of sharp shock of everything stopped, and people really drew breath, and then very shortly afterwards, really creative responses started to happen, and I just keep thinking it will come back. You know, in a year's time, 2 years' time, we won't be back to the same as we were before, but we might be better.
Liz?
We are doing, the Plank is doing a project with the Working Class Movement Library, and we are creating a series of podcasts that team, artists, contemporary artists, with people from the Working Class Movement Library Writing Group, and they are investigating the collection of the library. And what that reveals is that the radical thinking of the past can also give us insight and optimism for the future. And so just last weekend, there's a festival gone on about the Pan-African Congress, which happened in Manchester in 1945. And these artists have unearthed the heroes and heroines from the past, and are going to be bringing them to the present and the future through podcasts. And we've never made podcasts before, so that's a whole new way of that library, but also us as an arts organisation reaching out in new ways. And I think that gives me optimism, that sort of looking outwards in new ways that I see so many people doing.
Yeah, beautiful. Amanda.
There's been so many amazing things. The virtual and physical at the same time dance performances going on in Russia, the craft boxes and letters and radio shows that are going on to connect people wherever they are. What's kept me going, I think, has been the listening. I'm often banging on about how working at pace can be so non-inclusive, that we all pile in and go, let's put on a show, let's do that. And at the same time, the inventiveness that's come from that has been exciting. The people who've come up with the prototype theatre in a box so they can wheel out a truck into anywhere and you can perform anywhere, it's beautiful. What I'm hearing is more people are, the listening, people are hearing, and what's being said is landing. And that may be our difficulty with understanding the ecology, freelancers, thinking about the earlier speakers today, our lack of understanding about the freelance workforce and who we are in the sector is one thing, but people are actually listening and tuning in and going, okay, there's a different way of thinking. And within that listening, there is space, which comes to the inclusion thing. There is space for us now to try a thing, things that aren't quite working, things that may not actually work, and it's okay. That's what keeps me going, that it's okay to try a thing and it doesn't work, but you tried it.
Beautiful. Just, yeah, perfect. I just want to thank all of you. Thank you, Danielle, Lorna, Amanda, and Liz, for sharing your knowledge, your energy, your reality and positivity with us today. I also want to thank Holly and the NRTF team for future-proofing the conference sector by bringing amazing content to the world in a whole new way. Thank you for this beautiful, wonderful conference. And finally, thanks to everyone who joined us today, who took time to listen in and share your questions and thoughts. We know how valuable everyone's time is, and thank you for sharing that with us today. So thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Nice day.
Thank you again to our panel. What keeps me positive is how many new musical theatre soundtracks have been released, because if we can't do the new musicals, let's make a soundtrack. And seeing other people's cats on Zoom, that's not a hint to anyone at all. If you're watching this on Attendify, if you could please hit refresh on your browser and have a look. We're going over to have a look at Pentabus's Planetfall. There is a short video that will be going live with the Q&A. If you hit refresh, the schedule will update the timings and all the links. See you soon. Thank you again, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.